Welcome to the latest Cairns Report video chat. We've got a lot of ground to cover in today's video. So to kick us off, I'm here with Anthony Bevan from Grant Thornton. Now Anthony, in this month's Cairns Report, you were behind a special report. We covered Indigenous business and the opportunity there. Talk to us about what you see as the opportunity there in Indigenous business, not only in our part of the world, but also across the nation.
Thanks, Gavin, and thanks for talking to me this afternoon. What we've been doing at Grant Thornton over the last 4 years is we've established a specific Indigenous advisory service, and what we've done is that Grant Thornton saw an opportunity that there's a lot of Indigenous businesses out there that are in the start-up phase, small, medium, and they're on a trajectory towards being large businesses. So we've established this specific Indigenous advisory service about 4 years ago to assist and work with Indigenous businesses right across Australia to help them achieve their goals in terms of economic participation, business development, and generating good business and income.
And what type of sectors are we talking about in the economy? I mean, are they sort of focused on health, for example? Where are those opportunities at?
What the most of the surveys and studies are showing is there's between about 9,000 and 16,000 Indigenous businesses in Australia at the moment, which is quite impressive. But most importantly, between 2006 and 2016, we've seen a 72% increase in Indigenous business. So there's a lot of growth in the sector, a lot of opportunities in the sector, and what we're seeing is a lot of those opportunities are coming from government contracts in terms of construction, in terms of catering, administrative support, and we're seeing a lot of financial services, particularly around the management of native title royalties and benefits, where Indigenous people are leveraging their land, either with mining companies, agricultural firms, government, and there's a lot of income flowing to these businesses, to Indigenous entities, and they're looking to diversify away from just relying solely on government funding. And so we've seen a real uptake in terms of more people going into business. And as I said, from 2006 to 2016 increased by 72%, which is very impressive.
And so in order to further take hold of that opportunity, to fulfill that potential, in your view, Anthony, what needs to happen?
With any new sector, with small and medium sized business, what Grant Thornton does, what we do here at Grant Thornton is we provide a lot of the back office type support, the advisory services, so that those entities are up and running. There's a lot of compliance with any business these days, so what we do is we help with the compliance side of things, we help with the governance side of things, and that's what we're looking to do, is move small and medium businesses up into that large sector. And that's what we're seeing right across the country is Indigenous people are accessing their land, taking control of their land, and there's a lot of opportunities, whether it's mining, agricultural, tourism, hospitality, service delivery, administrative support. And what we're doing is supporting those aspirations as people leverage their land to move into economic development, to provide opportunities for families, for communities, and for individuals.
Is there more scope for corporate Australia to partner with Indigenous business, to whether in a mentoring capacity or as Grant Thornton does, that sort of behind the scenes work?
Absolutely, and what we're seeing right across Australia is the corporate sector, the government sector, have identified that a need to work with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses right across the country, and what we see in the corporate sector is a lot of large corporations provide opportunities for their staff to volunteer and work with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses and entities. And what we're also seeing though is large corporates and the government are now saying that a certain percentage of contracting, of contracts, and employment has to meet certain targets involving Aboriginal and Torres Strait people and businesses. So the corporate and the government have put their money where their mouth is, and so they're requiring certain number of contracts, percentage of contracts to be awarded to Aboriginal and Torres Strait people. So there's real opportunity for small and medium-sized Indigenous businesses to take advantage of that and to, as I said, move into that larger size. And that's what we do at Grant Thornton, and what there are other opportunities right across the sector: construction, tourism, administrative support, hospitality. There's lots of opportunities to work with joint venture with Aboriginal and Torres Strait businesses to tap into this market that the large corporates are developing, that the government's developing. And so, as I said, there's lots of opportunities there.
Well, make sure you download the latest Cairns Report for even more info from Anthony around that opportunity piece in Indigenous business. Let's head downstairs and have a chat to the team at Holding Redlich. I'm here now with James Harding from Holding Redlich. James, massive issue for all businesses in Cairns and across Queensland. From December 17, the state government's COVID vaccine health directives come into play. A lot of confusion, a lot of uncertainty. Your take on it all, what does it mean for business?
Well, it means different things for all different types of businesses. As you probably know from reading the news, what's likely to be enacted from the 17th of December is a mandate for certain types of venues for all staff and patrons to be fully vaccinated. So that's venues, things like restaurants, pubs, residential aged care, indoor entertainment venues, outdoor entertainment venues. And for those businesses, it then becomes law that for someone to come in or someone to work there, they have to be vaccinated. Putting that aside, there's actually a whole lot of law around mandated vaccines for staff, and whether within an employer-employee relationship, what you can and can't do when it comes to vaccinations generally.
And particularly then for, is no doubt a lot of employers watching our Cairns Report video chat. Again, does it just depend on what type of industry you're in terms of whether you have to mandate that staff are vaccinated? I mean, so confusing.
Well, you might have seen the Fair Work Ombudsman published a list of different categories of workplaces and the likelihood of a mandate for vaccination within those different categories being a lawful and reasonable direction to an employee. So, for example, a frontline worker working in a hospital aged care, in those circumstances, a mandate for vaccination would be most likely upheld, all the way through to someone who doesn't work in the front lines at all, warehouse where there's no sort of direct facing public contact. It's probably very unlikely that a direction would be upheld.
Well, it's going to be a very interesting time ahead. Any advice for business about, obviously this is sort of general overview advice in our video chat. I mean, what can businesses do, particularly over the next, we're a month away from this happening. What should they do?
Well, between now and the 17th, you should bring yourself as up to date as you can on what your rights and obligations are as an employer. And if you're an employee watching this, also as an employee. From the 17th, the landscape is actually more simple because a mandate gives more certainty to an employer to act within their rights when it comes to staff and patrons. So if it is against the law that someone work there without a vaccine and they are not willing to follow that, obviously the employer may be subject to very big fines or even a term of imprisonment. We're not sure exactly what the consequences are going to be yet, but the talk is that it's going to be significant fines of say $12,000 to $15,000 and a term of up to 6 months imprisonment. So very serious consequences. So if an employee doesn't follow that lawful direction, which is made lawful by the fact it is a law that you must be vaccinated, then that certainly gives the business some certainty. But what about all the businesses that don't make up those venues in the mandate on the 17th? They should get some legal advice in relation to, well, what are the risks involved with mandating vaccines in their particular business. So a great example might be if you're a company, if you're just running normal tours out in the open, wearing masks, and maybe the risk is not so significant. But if you're running a tour company and you have members of the public inside the vehicle, then perhaps it's a different scenario where you can't socially distance, and maybe mandated vaccines in that instance may be required or could be mandated. But it's a case-by-case basis. It really is.
The final question I wanted to put to you, James, was how do businesses police this? I mean, how do you check, particularly those industries, hospitality for example, where people must be vaccinated to enter? How do they police it?
We just don't know yet, but what the understanding is that the government's working tirelessly to update the check-in app, the Check-in Queensland app, to be able to tie in to vaccination data in a privacy appropriate way to give you a tick or a cross on your check-in app so that a venue can check your check-in, go, yep, you're checked in, and yes, you're vaccinated, or no, you're not vaccinated. Or if you have an exemption, some sort of yellow tick or something for an exemption. So
it's still being worked on.
It is, that's right. And probably we won't know until very close to. Obviously, everything the government has to do is very reactive, trying to do what they feel is best moving forward. It's very difficult to try and proactively deal with these sorts of issues.
And in turn, very difficult for businesses to keep up to speed. James Harding from Holding Redlich, thank you very much. Let's head over to Belle Property and have a chat about the local property market. I'm here now with Steve Barton from Belle Property Cairns for the topic that everyone wants to know about, real estate in Cairns. But specifically, Steve, you look after a lot of the rentals here at Belle. Tell us, the situation with rentals has been pretty crazy. If you cast your eye back over the past years, our last video chat for the year, paint a bit of a picture about where we've come from in rentals and where we are now.
Okay, no worries. My name's Steve. I'm the head of the property management department with Belle Property Cairns. We have been tracking the numbers with particular interest on a weekly basis since the pandemic started. Prior to the pandemic, the average vacancy rate in Cairns was around 2 to 3%. 2.5–3% is fairly comfortable for Cairns. What we saw particularly since April 2020, that was when the market really constricted and the vacancy rate dropped down to, in Cairns itself, it was sitting around 5%, but for the greater Cairns region, which is what we were tracking, so that's sort of Gordon Vale to Palm Cove, it was sitting about 8.8%. Okay, if you want to talk actual figures, March 2020, there was 677 properties available on the 25th of March, Greater Cairns region again, not houses, apartments, whatever. We saw that grow as I think a lot of the holiday market sort of went, we've got no bookings, find me a tenant. And so it swelled to about 880 in or around April. And from there, it just dropped and it kept going down. At its least, there was 285 properties available, which is ridiculous. Like the average, pre-pandemic, you're sitting around 700 properties. At the moment, the most recent, so the start of this week, hovering around that 350 mark.
Okay.
So we're seeing more apartments coming back on. Houses are still very tight.
And so if you're a family of 4 or 5, for example, obviously looking for a house, absolutely almost impossible to find a place, or at least the waiting list, the number of people who are applying for these rentals must be through the roof.
Oh, there's a lot of heat on the market. We're getting, I've never seen it quite this bad. I don't think anyone has in recent memory, where to the point where we were getting people applying from Bundaberg, just trying to secure something, and they would pack their family up and jump in the car if they were approved. So you just don't hear of that sort of thing happening. And I guess, with the pandemic, a lot of people found out we have the ability, we can work remotely, more so, we can work from home. So I guess they're thinking, well, I don't really need to be here if I've got a home there. Let's go live in Cairns. But
And that's a lot of that, I mean, we've still got population growth in Cairns, even if it was at 10-year averages. That's still people moving into the city, let alone that, as you said, that work from home factor that's no doubt boosted the population.
Yep.
Now, Steve, if you cast your eyes forward, always difficult to peer into the crystal ball, can you see this rental situation improving at any point over the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, look, we are seeing signs of improvement, so it is getting a little bit better for the people looking for somewhere to rent. What I think as well, we're going to have a lot of houses that are in construction that are going to be finished, because there's been a lot of building approvals in Cairns. It's like, so once those houses are finished, the people that are currently renting will be moving into their homes. Therefore, that should provide some extra houses or properties for the rental market. So, it's a tricky one, because obviously in my position I have clients are the property owners and clients are the people that are renting the property, so you kind of spread a little bit between both parties. But I think we will see things starting to return semi-normal come mid next year. It's still a long way away, but we should start seeing more properties filtering back on the market month on month. But will it ever get back to how it was before? Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
And finally, Steve, what about rental prices? I mean, obviously that the lack of supply, increased demand, it's got to result in rental prices going up.
It sure has. It sure has. I mean, look, again, it's a good thing for the homeowners and the investors, because for a long time rents have basically been stagnating or just going up very, very marginally or minor increases. Because there's so much pressure on the market at the moment, then yes, the rental returns are better. It's making it more attractive for investors. So we're starting to see more investors looking into the market. We're starting to see the New South Wales, the Victorian investors, property investors, or speculative purchasers, or they're buying a place and then they only want a tenant for 6 months because then they're going to renovate it, then maybe re-let it. So rents are definitely rising, and it would be tracking on a similar angle to sales.
There you go. Crazy times in the Cairns rental market, that's for sure. Steve Barton from Belle Property Cairns, thanks for your time today.
No worries, thank you very much.